What's going on, everybody? My name is Tenebrous Infinite, and welcome back to Generation Zero. For today, we have the first wishlist video of 2020, my dudes. This is a huge video that I have been planning on working on for absolute ages, ever since I analyzed the sidearms in this game. So today we're going to be talking about the potential for dual wielding here in Generation Zero. But before we get into that, I plan on making a video very soon about the most common community requests that I got over on my video on what's coming up for Generation Zero in 2020. There was some most excellent feedback from you dudes on that video, and so I really want to make a video where I'm highlighting some of the most common community requests that I saw out of the couple hundred or so comments on that video. So you guys can look forward to a video on that next week. So over the span of 2019, we managed to see a couple of my wishlist ideas actually get implemented into the game, in the form of the exosuit, which still is one of the best looking vanity items and vanity sets that you can complete in this game. And also we managed to see a police station get implemented into Himmervet City. This is probably the coolest thing that I've ever experienced in video gaming. Not just having my ideas heard out, but actually seeing them come to life in the game is incredible. It's honestly something that I have a hard time putting words to. And you guys know that I'm pretty good at talking, but honestly, all I can say is thank you to the developers for hearing out, you know, my crazy wacky ideas, and not just thinking that, hey, yeah, that's a cool idea, but actually going the extra mile and bringing it to the game. It's honestly the most incredible thing I've ever experienced in video gaming. And yeah, I just want to say thank you before I get into my new wish list here for 2020. So, let's talk about dual wielding now. I think that there's actually a really high potential that we could see dual wielding come to the game. From a little hint that we can find off in Himmervet, in the form of a dead body with two guns sitting at his sides, the idea of dual wielding at least has passed through the development team at some point. Even just from this little set piece. So I think that dual wielding would add a lot of fun to the combat in the game, would bring a whole new spin on controls when you're fighting, and would bring a ton of options to what you can choose in your loadout for your character. There are a couple cruxes to my whole idea here for dual wielding, but honestly I think that as long as crafting comes to the game, the potential for things like dual wielding and weapon modifications of that sort is very high, and I think that we could potentially see weapons get a whole new breath of life from crafting itself. So let's first talk about some of the weapons that I think could come to the game in the form of dual wielding, and then we'll talk about how I imagine this as a crafting recipe, and then we'll talk about some of the benefits and deficits that would come to turning these weapons into a dual wielding option. So I took the time to lay out my inventory all pretty like here just to show this off, but I think that these weapons that I have selected here in my inventory are the weapons that make the most sense when it comes to having a dual wielding variant. You might be wondering why there isn't a shotgun included in here, and that's because dual wielding shotguns is more of a Doom mechanic and more of a high fantasy kind of weapon idea, as opposed to the more grounded fantasy that we see here in Generation Zero. I do think that if we ever see some sort of handheld shotgun get brought to the game, then that could potentially have a dual wielding variant as well. But for now, I think that these weapons are the weapons that make the most sense when it comes to dual wielding. So the weapons that I've picked are the Capist, the HP5, the Molar, the Magnus, and the Clock, as well as the EXP variants of these weapons. We'll talk about how I think that this could all get balanced into the game and the gameplay mechanics in just a minute, but honestly I think that these weapons make the most sense when it comes to dual wielding. So let's talk about a little bit of the gameplay features when it comes to actually dual wielding these weapons in the game. So essentially what I think dual wielding could do in a control format is remove the option to aim down sights, obviously, and replace the left trigger or left mouse click or whatever the key that you choose for aiming down sights is on computer with a fire mechanic, so that way you would have two individual trigger options for your two individual guns. It would remove the accuracy of aiming down sights, but it would double your fire rate, so that would be a little bit of a give and take situation there when selecting your loadout. Now, I also think that there might be a small issue with the idea of having a reload animation when it comes to dual wielding. But I think that it could be as simple as your character just dropping their gun down off screen and then pulling their gun back up when the weapon is reloaded and having that serve as the reload animation. We'll talk in my segment about balancing about how long I think that these reload times should be, but I think that if the devs enjoy the idea and humor the idea of just dropping the weapons and then bringing them back up onto the screen as the reload function, they could decide the reload times in the finale of this. And then from a third-person perspective, because I know that the reload animations play out in third person as well, the character could simply just lower their guns and then bring their guns back up. There wouldn't need to be anything flashy or crazy about it. Just keeping it simple and keeping it concise would be probably the best way to go about implementing a reload function to dual wielding here in Generation Zero. Because again, even though this game is grounded fantasy, there is a little bit of suspension of disbelief that you can have when you're playing Generation Zero. So now let's talk about how I think that this could all be implemented with crafting in mind. And then after that, we'll talk about the various balancing and the way that I think that these guns could really serve as weapons in the game. But for now, for the crafting, we know the crafting is coming at some point, and it is long awaited by most of us. So I think that it would be really cool to see these come to the game as crafting blueprints, as opposed to being an individual weapon that you just pick up off an enemy. The requirement then would make for much more extended gameplay out of it than just simply grinding for a weapon. The way I think that this could all work as a crafting recipe is that it would require two individual weapons that are only available to the 5 crown and 6 crown variants of these weapons, and there would be some sort of major tertiary resource cost alongside that. So there would be something like scrap or something like that that you would combine with the whole 2 weapons in the crafting bench in order to then pop out with 2 weapons kind of combined into an individual slot that you could then equip to your character and utilize. And then I think that these blueprints could only drop from Apocalypse machines or higher, and the way the blueprints could be spread out would probably work much more simple if you had the sidearms go with the runners, the SMGs go with the hunters, and then the EXP variants of these weapons go to the tanks. And then I think that that would be a fun way of implementing it all in the blueprint gameplay loop and also in the crafting gameplay loop as well. It would require the character to grind out these individual weapons, and then it would require the character to grind out the blueprints, and then grind out the scrap or whatever tertiary resource cost will be added to the game. So that's kind of my mentality on how this could all work as a crafting recipe, as opposed to just being a weapon drop. And I'd really like to know what your guys' thoughts are on taking that approach, as opposed to just having this be any typical weapon that you can pick up. Instead having it be implemented into the crafting gameplay loop, because I really want to know what you guys think about crafting in general, and I think that this is one of the big ways we could see crafting get implemented to the game. So from a gameplay perspective, I could see the molder having very high accuracy and a very low recoil and a very quick reload of just maybe like somewhere like 2 seconds to reload the gun. Right now, the reload for the molar is only about a second long, so I feel like 2 seconds would make a lot of sense. For the clock, dual wielding, I could see it having a medium accuracy, again with a low recoil, and again with a quick reload, because again, its reload animation takes only about a second long. And also I could see the EXP version actually having the exact same traits and attributes as the typical clock, because the only real difference between the typical clock and the EXP version is that low EMP chance. For the Magnus as a dual wielding function, I could see the Magnus having incredibly low accuracy, a really heavy recoil, and the slowest reload out of all of them by a couple seconds. I think that the Magnus would require the biggest kind of nerf when it came to dual wielding, just because the Magnus is already such a powerful sidearm that if you were dual wielding it and you had just the same amount of power and the same amount of accuracy, it would just be completely overpowered. Now for the K-Pist and the SMGs in general, I think that the K-Pist could have a medium accuracy to it and a medium recoil. As you can see from the recoil cursor, it spreads out pretty gradually as you fire the gun. So imagining that in a standpoint of 2, I think that it would make a lot of sense for the recoil of the gun to be a little bit heavier than the sidearms. But also I feel like the reload speed for it could be a little bit longer than the sidearms, because again, the reload animation for it in general is already longer than the sidearms. And for the EXP K-Pist, I actually, again, in a similar standpoint to the Magnus, feel like it should have something done to it in order to balance it out a little bit better. So for the EXP K-Pist, I think that it would be better for it to have lower overall accuracy and a much heavier recoil, because realistically it would make a lot of sense to just have the EXP K-Pist in overdrive all the time when it's in the dual wielding function. But the reload speed could remain the exact same as the typical K-Pist, so that it would still remain kind of as the superior version in Generation 0 here. And now lastly for the HP5. I think the HP5 could have really high accuracy, a really low recoil, and a reload speed of about the same time period as the K-Pist. Right now, as it stands, the HP5 is kind of dwarfed by the EXP K-Pist, and so I think that it would be really great to see the HP5 shine in a dual wielding standpoint, and kind of be like the ultimate dual wield gun. So there you guys go, my first wish list of 2020 here, and I really hope that the devs enjoy this idea and enjoyed the little bit of brainstorming that I did. Hopefully this is something that we'll see brought to the game, because I really think that it would be a ton of fun to see dual wielding here in Generation 0. But as always, I want to know your guys' opinions down below. If you like this idea, if you don't like this idea. If you do, hit the thumbs up, and if you don't, hit that thumbs down button. And yeah, definitely thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Until then, peace.